Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning, Linda. So nice to be with you again. Oh my goodness, it feels like it's been a week.
Yeah. It's been a great weekend for you. You had your birthday. So I want to welcome you to the 6th decade, this new era in your life. It's just so awesome.
Thank you. It is my 6th decade. I was thinking that's my 59th birthday, but it's like, considering, and I just said this yesterday in something I did, considering we spend 9 months, if we're lucky, in utero. So in some ways,
Well, and I believe in China, I don't know if they still do, but they used to say you were 1 when you were born. Like they used to age people a year earlier because of the time in the womb.
Yep, exactly.
So there's that.
So 0 starts at conception.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. And it's just such an incredible time. It's such a privilege to live to this age because we've lived long enough to see enough that you start to see patterns of how things fit together, how they unfold, the ebbs and flows, and it's something that I think when 200 years ago, people to live to the 6th decade was exceptional. Like the average death rates were around 20, 30, 40, and especially for women because so many women died in childbirth.
Yeah,
but then
that's true.
For men too, because they were always at war with each other. So we were taking each other out in different ways. And so I think life was less complex in some ways. There was more of a connection between mind, body, which allowed a better connection with spirit. So I think that people could mature earlier than they can now, and that you almost have to live to 60 or 70 to start having the time and the space and things unfolding at a speed that you could process enough that you could start to recognize those patterns and get that kind of wisdom. So I think it used to happen younger than it does now.
I think you are exactly right for us and our era. I'm not sure that applies to younger people.
It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting for them to see.
Yeah, and I'd love to have conversations with people too, because what I'm finding is that, I'm coming in. I'm coming in with a pretty well preserved sense of wisdom within me, and I managed to maintain that through my life. So I'm kind of at it, but having seen and my heart broken over and over and over again as I watch the way adults treated each other. It was just awful. And then make me behave. Like it was again, back to that gaslighting. My brother was teasing me on Sunday about using that word. But it speaks to that, because it's like, that do as I say, but not as I do mentality that is it works for the adults because it's in their best interest, but for children, like, what is that doing? And for me, it was torture. It was like torturous all the time because I was forced to comply. I was forced to, as I was being unwilded at that time. Glennon Doyle.
Yeah.
Glennon Doyle is her name.
Well, and that's such an important discernment to get and to understand how that mixed messaging that we get as kids really teaches this whole concept that people are talking about virtue signaling.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
it's like, oh, you
absolutely.
end on the outside, but you hide, you don't know how to express, there's
It's
no
a
room,
hidden agenda.
and there's no teaching of how to express yourself honestly and then be heard and have, there's no nobody's learned how to listen and hear properly in that are in the power position.
And honestly, unless you were in, uh, education around psychology and or adult learning, you didn't ever hear the word narcissist until uh, probably 4 or 5 years ago. It really surfaced, and YouTubers were doing all kinds of uh, just deep dives into the meaning and descriptions and how to
Yeah,
handle and their life stories too, a lot of them.
yeah.
So, but that, bless them for doing that, because I feel like that educated and sort of prepared the ground for the now, which is, if we did not have that, if we did not have that in our understanding, what's happening right now in the political landscape of the US and how that's affecting the rest of the countries around the world, the rest of the citizens of the world, we would be in a very different place right now.
But as you're sharing too, what comes to me is how we end up disintegrated. They talk about part of maturing is to come to a point of integration. And as what's coming to me now is, the expression outliers. Well,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what you were describing in yourself is holding on to some of this inner knowledge that you knew as a child as in layers, Layer. So they're your inner layers. And they're in conflict,
LAIRS as well.
but they're in conflict with the outliers, only that's LIARS.
Oh, I like this.
Right? So we've got our inner layers that are in conflict with these outliers or outer liars. And we've got to.
There's no reckoning for children, though. So this is where the problem is. There is no reckoning for them because they live in a system that is so boundaried around what adults expect of them and all of that. If that is not healthy, if that is not in the best interest of the child, and I think, all the way back into history, when we think about let the children lead.
Well, and then I also think that if you get to the point, if you have the benefit of somehow or another getting to this age and stage where you are able to integrate the inner layers with the outliers, that what happens is that's where I feel for myself, and I can only base it on my own experience. So that I came to this place where I am able to really accept what is, be less disappointed when my hopes and expectations aren't met out there, that I can handle that. I mean, it's not that I don't get overwhelmed. It's not that I don't get upset by times, but I know how to self-soothe now. I know how to bring myself back to spaces of equanimity. And then it just makes life so much easier, and a place of forgiveness where I can look at some of the things that happened, like the early traumas. I've spoken before about my adoptive father being a dentist and doing my dental work for many years without freezing, at a request I made when I was like about six or seven. And because I didn't like the needle, and I numbed my jaw, my lip so bad, and I chewed it, and I gave myself a fat lip, which shamed me when I went to school and all sorts of stuff. So I didn't want freezing anymore. I would endure the pain of a lot of dental work, a lot of cavities being filled for years till I was like 18 or 19, and had to go to another dentist who wouldn't work on me without some kind of freezing, or they tried to give me gas at that time and I couldn't handle that at all. Oh, that was freaking me out because of the loss of control. But again, trauma behaviors. Anyway, but I can now look at that and forgive my adoptive father, not be mad at him for the abuse. I can say, wow, well, look what I learned to do. Look at the perseverance I learned. Look at the high tolerance level I have for physical pain. So I don't have to be medicating all the time for aches and pains or whatever. So, and I can also see another side of it, like how hard that must have been for him because he knew. I mean, he would ask me,
But you chose it. So at what point were you mad at him?
Well, because I thought, what parent would not say no to that?
So that was later. So that was years later.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was weird.
I was just trying to understand the context in which you were saying it at that
So
time.
as I was going through my healing journey and process and recognizing what trauma is and things that would have traumatized me, I didn't even realize that this was traumatic until that whole thing blew up on Oprah. Oprah's book club, when that fella had written the book about, was it a million pieces, something like that, and he'd written about having dental work without freezing, and then they found out that it was a lie, it wasn't true, and there was this whole controversy that no dentist would ever do that to anybody, and I didn't even realize it was a big deal till then. And then it was like, oh, well, maybe I better look into that. And why would my father say yes to that?
Right.
To a 6-year-old child. He never had trouble saying no to me about lots of things.
And then for the next 13
then it took
years.
Me a couple of years to work through all my trauma response physiologically that would come up in certain situations, and to start to recognize what that was and how it was linked. And in that healing process, in that becoming aware and discovering what have you, then getting over to a point where I could go, okay, so there he was in this position of, what do you say to this child who's determined that she's going to have her own way? Or do you say, well, get out of the chair, go home. I won't take care of you today. I don't know what position I put him in.
Yeah, but I would.
Yeah. And so to be able to go, okay, what were the gifts in that? Because this is what you hear in every tradition, every indigenous tradition, every sacred tradition. They always talk about the growth and the gifts that come from suffering. That if everything is really too easy and there are no real challenges that you face in your life, you don't develop things like perseverance. You don't develop strength. You don't develop courage. That it's that, it's just like muscles. You have to put weight on them in order to develop them.
Yeah, the resistance.
So I just, so some of that wisdom only comes with time and work and perspective to get the inner layers and the outliers, to recognize the stories that we tell ourselves or that people tell us to tell ourselves about what happened to us, that we can understand them at different layers over different times and phases of our lives and our healing process. Or I don't even want to call it a healing process anymore. I want to call it a reintegration process.
Yeah, that's what's coming to me as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, that's we've kind of started off in a different way today. So often in our when we do virtue picks together with people. We'll talk about what's going on in our lives first, then we'll do a virtues pick and say, how is that speaking to us in terms of what's going on in our lives or what we shared? So would you like to do that this way?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I love that you just brought that up, because as we were having this back and forth conversation, I was thinking to myself, this is very different than what we normally do and record. This is not a virtues pick and an honoring of the story. This, what we just did, is kind of a back and forth and more of a I don't know what to call it, but
a courageous conversation, a meaningful conversation.
But the point is, there's a very distinct difference, and I think that that is an excellent piece of wisdom that's just come up within you. So thank you for acknowledging that and having the courage to ask. Linda's going to pick a card. Just random pick one.
Yeah, from the Virtues Reflection cards.
You can go to virtuesproject.com and go to, I think it's in the resources part of the menu, you'll find the shop. Yeah. So
yeah, they're upgrading the website, so things are changing sometimes. Yeah.
Yep. Or you can jump onto our website at synergyeterra.ca and go to the Virtues Inspired link in the top menu. And in there, there's a link to the Virtues shop. But if you have a few pennies to give, go to virtuesproject.com and donate, because every dollar given gets matched, and so it's like a doubling up.
So we're going to do something weird today. We're going to post today, like real quick, because if it is Giving Tuesday, then that'll only work today, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, and I think it's once a month. And I've also started up a bit of a thing that I'm going to kick off in January, and I'm hoping that the donations to that, it's a free thing, but I'm hoping that anybody participating will kick in a donation now again, and that will go directly to virtuesproject.com.
Hey. Oh, I always love it when they come out, because it's always a surprise, and yet there's always something there.
Should we pause it, find the card, put it up?
Sure. The card is fairness.
Fairness is treating each other even-handedly, so that each person receives a share. With fairness, we meet everyone's needs. We listen to the views of others with openness and expect to be heard with equal respect. We don't focus on who is right, but on what is right for all concerned. Without bias, favoritism, or prejudice, we level the playing field. We are as protective of the rights of others as we are of our own. We seek not to overpower, but to empower. We are lovers of justice. Thomas Chandler Halliburton says, "Hear one side and you will be in the dark. Hear both sides and all will be clear." The practice of fairness. I treat others justly. I hear other points of view with openness. I expect respect for my perspective. I care more about doing right than being right. I believe in fair play. I have a win-win attitude. I'm thankful for the gift of fairness. It is our common ground.
Barbara, how is that speaking to you?
Wow. Considering the state of the world, how simple it is and how sensitive children are to this virtue of fairness. And, you know, how our virtues are barometers for what's right. And, you know, imagine following this path and living in a world where it doesn't matter that, you know, and fairness in a president, what does that look like? That looks like somebody who has their own very strong opinions about something, but who can make room for everyone else's opinions. That's fairness. And when that's not in place, when the bias and the prejudice is not, it's favored toward the individual or toward the one side, there's nothing fair about that. So it's about bloody time that, you know, everyone understood that fairness is it's a birthright. And it's, we know this from childhood. We need to learn that we undo our sensitivity to these virtues as we get more and more corrupt. And it, you know, there's a path to purity, so that we end up back on the right track. But I just hear this virtue showing up today as a really clear sign that, you know, a bird flies on two wings. You cannot fly on a single winged bird. It just does not work. So we all need to be in this together. And this is a really complicated, very simple path. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I am hearing the gentle discernment. I'm hearing the gentle discernment and the understanding at a deep, deep level of how important it is that we are able to respect differences of opinion, to hear other points of view, and to also be able to expect respect for our perspective when it's different, so that's what fairness entails. That it and that quote, you know, I'm hearing you really reiterate that you have to hear both sides or all sides. You cannot fly with a one-winged bird. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. How about for you? What's speaking to you today about fairness in our earlier conversation?
Well, I'm just thinking of, you know, how I am finally, you know, and again, it's taken me decades. I'm looking at my 70th birthday coming up in June, and it's like finally coming to this place where I can hear the views of others with openness. And I have strategies. I've learned ways to deal with my inner physiological responses when I disagree strongly. Now, does that mean that sometimes I don't get caught and you know, somebody throws a comment out there, and it's like a fisherman with a fly hook, you know, and I just swim along and bite it, and I get that hook in my mouth, and we're on, and they're reeling me in, and I'm wiggling like crazy, and we're having a disagreement. And you know what? They're kind of fun sometimes. I kind of enjoy them sometimes, and I have to recognize that I have that in me, and then it's my responsibility to catch myself and throw that hook, you know? Or if I've thrown the hook and somebody else has taken the bait, I'm equally responsible to recognize that, oh, we've gone to that place where it's no longer a friendly game, a friendly exchange, even though it might be quite emotionally expressed, or it's no longer friendly. We've crossed the line. We've gotten to that point where, you know, in sports, when we're kids, we're learning fairness, supposedly, to, you know, that's supposed to be the primary lesson out of sports games, is how to win fairly. And if you cheat, if you lie, then it's the win isn't worth it. That's what we were taught we were to be learning. But there's all these coaches out there, there's all these parents out there who go, you win at all costs. To heck with fairness. So again, those, and who do we reward? We reward the winner, whether they lied, cheated, or stole the win. And so, yeah, wow. So we're really not creating these environments. And I was listening to Meg Wheatley, Meg Wheatley on YouTube this weekend, and she talks about coming to this place in the world where, in the time that we're in, that it's really important to create islands of sanity, and in these small communities where we can get back in touch with what's really important, what really does help move us forward without seeking power over other people and hurting other people to get our way, or coming together in groups that will lie, cheat, and steal, and not care about. And you know, she mentioned about how one corporate place she was at speaking, somebody told her about, they're now referring to people at work as units. When they talk about it, you're a unit.
Oh, wow.
And that somebody, I think it was at Citibank, said that if he thought of how the people that they were making the policies for, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the idea is, if he thought of them as real people, he couldn't do his job. So by thinking of them as units, he didn't care what positions he was putting them in their work environment, right? They were just things. So again, how can we do that to other people, other human beings? So yeah, fairness is so needed, and we really need to get back in touch with how we create that in our families, in our communities. And it begins in small communities. It begins in the small places. And then when it's, you know, firmly reinforced in those places, then it's going to be in the outer places, the outer spaces. But right now, the outer spaces do not respect the concept of fairness. Yeah. So that's how it's speaking to me.
Well, Lynda, I'm really hearing your deep discernment and the consideration for all of the layers and the liars. I love that. And that just really speaks to your relationship with creativity and words and being able to articulate things in such a beautiful way. But the whole thing, you know, when we listen back to this layers and liars, and the islands of sanity, you know, in through the lens of this virtue, fairness. Yeah, it's you know, we're coming into our own, I feel, and I feel that strength in you when you're sharing and talking about some of the struggles and some of the realizations and wisdom. So thanks for being here.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. It's such an honor. Trusting, trusting in the flow, trusting in grace to take us where we need to go.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said.
So, and again, happy birthday.